What is up, everybody? Alone is back for its 9th season. This time we head to Eastern Canada, right on the northeastern coast of the entire country in Labrador. I really am interested to see how this location plays out. Our first episode and the preview made it seem like this area is very abundant. Which is great because one of the recent criticisms of the show is that it's just become a starvation contest, and I don't think that's always entertaining for us as the fans. We want the people who are out there, actually surviving. They're out hunting, trapping, fishing, whatever they're doing, providing for themselves. Those are the people that we want to see go head to head at the end, not necessarily the ones who just put on a bunch of weight before the show and then decide they're just going to go out there and burn as few calories as possible. Once again, we're going to have a season of bears, potential for black bears and polar bears this time around. I doubt we get any polar bears early on in the season, but maybe later on we will get a sighting or two. If you want to do the classic alone drinking game that was started last season, and every time somebody mentions a bear, just take a drink, you're probably going to be an alcoholic by the time the season ends. Before we get started, I know that there is a list of the contestants' items. There are 10 items that they were allowed to take. If you would like me to do a video going over that with all of you, I will. Just leave me a comment below, and if anybody's interested, I'll do that. So how we do this, we're going to go through person by person, kind of talk about what they did, and go from there. So we will start with Carrie Lee. She intrigued me right off of the start. It looks like she is very skilled, focusing on primitive skills, second oldest contestant ever on Alone, and she had a pretty successful week one. Besides getting absolutely obliterated by flies, she looked quite miserable there with all her bites across any piece of exposed skin she had. She did manage to get a grouse after a fashion. She missed her first shot, gets a second opportunity, scares the grouse, and then gets a third opportunity before taking it down. Without having seen the preview for the season and what else happened just on this episode, normally that would be a pretty big score for Alone to take down a grouse. But maybe this season that is just going to be the norm, that if you're not taking down a grouse or two every week, that you're going to be falling behind. I'd say out of our two female contestants that we had today, definitely a lot more interested in seeing what Carrie Lee can do. Next up, let's jump over to potentially an early favorite for the season, and that is Benji. He is a hunting guide specializing in bow hunting, but that is not totally what we saw him focus on this episode. Yes, he did get a squirrel, but the big score for him was the fishing. He made himself a little fly rod, and it looks like the contestants are only going to be allowed to fly fish, and I believe it said that they are allowed to use a dip net. So there's not going to be a lot of diversity when it comes to fishing and trapping fish or any of that. Might just be exclusively fly fishing, but Benji found himself sort of a little tidal pool that was basically stranding a bunch of smaller fish in an enclosed area that he was able to fish out 12 fish. Yes, they were small, but he hammered out 12 fish in one sitting. That is phenomenal for Alone, and I think could be an incredible advantage for him if that pool can stay open for a decent amount of time. Now, I believe that the temperature was around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 15-ish Celsius. So there should still be a pretty extended period before we get to winter. Also, being where they're located, I do think it's going to get cold for the winter, but I don't think that we're going to be expecting anything like 40 below or anything of that nature. Yes, we will see sub-zero temperatures, but I don't think that we're going to get to that brutal, nasty temperature that was possible in somewhere like Great Slave Lake, where we were, I believe, two and 3 seasons ago. Yeah, so another thing about Benji, he plans on spending the first 30 days focusing on food before really building his shelter, and he put on 36 pounds for the show. So he's definitely in it to win it, and very interested to see how far he can take things. Next up, we have Jessie. Don't really have too much to say about Jessie. She's a survival instructor, and she had our first sort of bear-ish encounter of the season, and that's really all we saw from her. Next up, Juan Pablo. His first line of the season. This area here sucks. Just bringing the negativity. Such a great opener for Juan. He is going in with the miserable strategy, where if he expects nothing, that anything he does get will be a huge bonus. Pretty early on, he finds a spot to build his shelter. Could be a little advantage for him there, not having to spend weeks or days or numerous calories looking for a place to build that hut. On top of that, he found a huge pile of trash, which somehow he turned into a functioning stove. Also used the heat resistant part of his gaiters to seal his chimney to kind of prevent him from burning his shelter down. And just having that little stove could end up being a huge advantage for him, just because he's not going to have to spend a ton of calories hauling rocks or doing who knows what, trying to make some sort of makeshift chimney. He's got it all done from trash, and that's just one more thing he does not have to worry about this season. Also wanted to note that it looks like Juan Pablo has spent time in much more harsh areas than Labrador, which could end up being an advantage for him. Next up, we have Jacques. He is the youngest contestant on the season, a mountaineer and a glacier guide. He found, speaking of people who found stuff, he found a fully functional trap. Like a fully functional spring-loaded trap. Like when he spotted it, I was just like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then a few seconds later, he's like, I think it might still work. And sure enough, it works. Be interesting to see if he's able to trap anything with it. I'm going to say that he probably isn't going to succeed in that, but he might not need it, because he seemed pretty proficient with his bow. It didn't even have to put clothes on to take down a squirrel and a grouse. I was kind of chuckling to myself seeing him with his rubber boots and his long underwear on, hunting down that grouse. So he's got a squirrel, he's got a grouse, all in episode 1. He seems like he's going to be an interesting competitor, and definitely excited to see what he does this season. Also, which is partway through the episode, he suddenly had half a shelter. Don't know, we never saw him do anything on it, just all of a sudden it was just there. So kind of cool. Maybe next episode he'll just randomly have a full house. Lastly, our last competitor for the week was Igor. His big storyline for the day was he walked his entire area, kind of got himself stranded, had to just throw down his sleeping bag on some rocks for the night, hikes his whole entire area looking for a place to build his shelter, ends up deciding he'd just build his shelter right where they dropped him off from the helicopter, which I found kind of funny because when he was up high on the rocks and he showed the camera of all the area, when he kind of zoomed in on the landing location before he said that's where the helicopter dropped him off, I thought to myself, hey, that probably wouldn't be a bad area for a shelter. And sure enough, that's where he ends up planning on building. His big score for the episode was some seaweed. So, you know, some people get grouse, some people get a dozen fish, and some people just manage to find some seaweed. So that's it for episode 1. Very excited for this season. I want to see lots of skills employed this season, lots of hunting, lots of fishing, and let's really see which one of these competitors can take this the farthest when winter sets in and they have to deal with the extreme climate of northern Canada. So that's it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment, please. I always enjoy replying back to as many as I can. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later.